All right, who has a 108 word summary of all the trouble you got into last week?
Lucius did crimes.
Did crimes? That's it?
He did crimes. No, there were other things involved, but Lucius did crimes.
Did a lot of downtime, did a lot of math, a lot of bookkeeping.
Yeah.
A lot of ship repair.
We can now set sail at 1 mile per hour. And then there was one more inconsequential thing that it might even not even be worth mentioning, but
No, not at all.
one of the previous kings of Dunfoss sailed back in, and he's like Cloud of Darkness.
Ghost Boy?
Yeah, like he went and started like a metal band, and he came back to shoot like the metal cover or something. I don't know.
Okay, I do want to apologize here because I did ask for an adventure of fighting aboleths under the Sunless Sea. I assumed that would be the Underdark and not the sun would go out, so that's my bad.
Sun's gone. No more.
You have to.
It was like just there. You guys were out in space. You checked. It was.
Why did you delete the sun?
I've been pulling that trick for a couple of campaigns now, where I like to ask my players like, "What's an adventure you'd like to run?" And I think Destil just thinks of the worst places.
Yeah, I always think of stuff I have never done, which is usually places people don't want to go.
The worst places.
Next adventure, I want to go to a big treasure room with hundreds of millions of gold in it and all the magic weapons in the world.
We did that this one.
We could take them and wield them without any problems or issues whatsoever. We spent 4 sessions there.
Oh, so Fallout 4 then. Or Fallout New Vegas, I'm sorry.
That's the adventure I want to do.
It would literally just be like, I don't know, a mimic colony.
Hmm.
Oh, Fallout 76. What the fuck is wrong with me?
We have mimic colonies in one of the books now.
Yeah, I know.
I am noticing, I think I mentioned before we started streaming, but I am noticing that while I like their pattern of releasing like more generalist books and fewer of them, it is getting very, very hard to remember what material is in which book.
Yeah.
Like, I know one of those books up there has mimic colonies in it, but because all their books are like named after NPCs, I have no idea where to look for it.
Cautious.
Tasha's mimic colony.
Yeah, well, it's not her mimic colony. It's in the back about those weird magical biomes.
That's right. Yeah, that's where it is. Need to just... Maybe somebody's already done this. Maybe somebody has like a Google Sheets or something that's just like the master index for all 5th edition material. So we've established that none of you were in Dunfoss during the extremely short reign of King Catsbin IV, which would have been about 13 years ago. And none of you have any dealings with the Temple of Osprim in Dunfoss, nor with the Circle of Rains. Hasn't really come up, but the Circle of Rains is one of the magic schools in Dunfoss, and their primary function is to ensure good weather patterns. Dunfoss does not experience a lot of like terrible ocean swells or destructive storms blowing in, specifically because there's a magic guild, the strongest members of which have magics that can control and suppress weather. At the time, Catsbin was the headmaster of this guild, and it was time for the magic guild to choose a new king, and they chose Catsbin IV. Catsbin IV was also an acolyte in the Temple of Osprim, a deity who is also connected to ocean travel and the weather thereupon. He celebrated his coronation by sailing off to enjoy a revel at sea, and his boat never came back. So later that year, the next court, the Court of Commerce, elevated Maximilian Silverwolf. And Catsbin has just sailed back into town on a bizarre, ghostly-looking vessel at a time when the sun is blotted out of the skies. And so the four of you are kind of massed up on one of these harbors somewhere watching the spectacle, yes?
Yeah, we're all flying.
Yeah.
We're all flying. So Catsbin has given his proclamation using some kind of magical enhancement to ensure that his voice booms out across the water and can be heard in all directions in the harbors. And at first, everything's quiet. There's a lot of confusion. Nobody really knows what's going on. But then you start hearing voices in the crowd behind you, here and there. Random people just shouting out things like, "Long live King Catsbin! Catsbin's returned to us!" And there's also voices of disagreement. And things start to get a little tense in the crowds. After issuing his proclamation on the vessel, Catsbin seems to survey the areas. It's hard to make out his facial features at this distance, but you can tell because he's turning his whole body to look at each of the harbors in turn, casting his gaze over them. And I would like each of the four of you to make a charisma saving throw. Lucius, pleased to be making this saving throw at advantage.
Is this against magic?
Yes, it is. It's very
As
against
a
magic.
gnome.
Are they magic plants?
I'm
No.
also super advantage.
Is it against being charmed?
Yes.
Okay, I get advantage as well.
Ooh, so everybody
That's
gets
a
advantage.
11.
That is a 10.
I don't want to be charmed.
Yeah, can I bump that up to 16
Jesus.
Bump it up how?
Me too.
with Flash of Insight as a reaction?
Yeah. We're looking for a 16.
Just did it. Just got it.
So just Alex and Lucius made that?
Seems like it.
The two of you have no memory, Gus and Connor, of King Catsbin. If anything, you've heard his name in passing. He wasn't even on the throne long enough to have any kind of lasting impact on how the city conducts business. So he didn't even have time to be a good or a bad king. He's not fondly remembered or unfondly remembered. What was that president that was in office for like 40 days and he got assassinated?
William Henry Harrison.
Yeah, that guy. Nobody knows his name except Destil.
Everyone
because...
knows his name exactly for that reason. And because it was in a Simpsons episode.
I don't think he was assassinated. I think he got sick really quickly.
Yeah, he gave a 2-hour speech at the, actually, for other reason, he gave a 2-hour speech at the podium on inauguration during a pouring rain and died of the flu and pneumonia a month later.
Is that actually true?
Yes, that is 100% true.
He died from his own... Okay, so Catsbin's story isn't quite that dumb. Because there's any number of reasons why you might sail out of harbor and the ship might not be found again. Like, it's a legitimate danger sailing at sea. It's probably a topic of great debate whether it's more or less dangerous to be sailing when you have like weather control on your side. Because on one hand, you can always ensure the wind's at your back and you're not going to get caught in any storms. On the other hand, you're kind of tempting fate because there are a lot of ocean gods and one of them's going to get pissed at you. Like, turn off my storms, will you? So Gus and Connor, you were somewhat surprised when you... I'm sorry, Lucius and Alex, you guys are somewhat surprised when Gus and Connor start issuing their agreement that they're glad to see Catspan returning.
Connor, were you even in town when Catspan was king?
Gus, you totally haven't been here that long. What? Do you know something about this guy I don't?
And for some reason, the two of you don't know anything about this guy. Except you've heard his name in passing and you know the story. The general story is he left on a big party boat and never came back. That's it. That's the end of it.
He left on
I'm
a
just
big
glad
party.
Yeah, and now he's back.
But you just have this deep feeling, for whatever reason, that Catspan is the rightful king. He was placed on the crown by lawful process, by the court of the arts, and he didn't die, and he didn't abdicate. So it's a done deal.
Surely that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, assuming there wasn't any magical bullshit. Also, that might technically be true, but I'm sure the political realities are a lot harsher.
Yeah. A land can't go for a whole. How long was it? It was about a year.
18 years?
13 years. When
13 years.
Catspan's ship disappeared
about
about 13 years ago.
And it was
And
about
now-
a year before they actually selected a new king.
And now he's back. It's really good. Don't look at me like that.
Not so sure about that one.
And this kind of disagreement is happening all around you, amongst the crowd. Lots of murmuring happening, lots of people speaking in favor of King Catspan, lots of people speaking in favor of King Tensails, the sitting king. And the four of you are known in town, across the city, to be supporters of King Tensails. So the fact that two of you are now calling out in approval of King Catspan's arrival. I keep wanting to say Caspian.
I mean, he's your character. You can do what you
I can
want.
see why.
There was a Narnia
probably-
book where King Caspian went sailing on an adventure.
I mean, if I'm being totally honest, like, I'm probably going to do that, so. Not intentionally, just, I'm a moron. That's all.
So Lucius and Alex, you're noticing that Connor and Gus, the fact that they're adding their voices to the ones calling out in favor of the return of King Catspan, you're noticing that they're starting to sway a few other people in your vicinity.
With my, the only time Gus is actually good at convincing people is when I'm not the one doing it. Apparently.
Confusing.
This proceeds for a few minutes, and eventually the man on the deck of the ship, presumably Catspan himself, again in his booming voice, calls out, "Will no good guildsman or wharf master come forward and offer the rightful king of Dunfoss a place to moor his ship?" And where are you guys located? Which of the three harbors at the moment?
Probably East
And
Harbor.
my understanding was we're over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
King Maximilian did not have a royal ship. There is a spot designated in High Courts Harbor. There is a private harbor specifically for use of the crown that Maximilian either leased out to business partners or just let sit empty for most of his reign. And very famously, when King Tensails made his grand entrance, he sailed directly into that spot. And his ship sits there till this day when it's not sailing. And so the voices around you start to turn. The conversation starts to turn towards the usurper's ship is in the royal harbor, so the rightful king has no place to moor his vessel. And you start hearing people calling out across the ocean, or across the harbor, rather. Places where King Catsbin might moor his ship until like this parking violation can be handled. And at this point, you start seeing smaller boats, push boats or rowboats, being launched from areas, especially several of them from High Court's harbor, several more from the East and West harbors as well. People vying for the king's attention. And
yeah, Lucius is very intrigued on those. What happens to those guys? Like, are we in a bug sapper situation, or what's going on with those?
Connor, we should go out there. Come on, let's go get a boat.
No, you should stay right here.
Chill out, Lucius. It'll be fine.
What business would you have with him?
said the guy who flew out to Ten Sail's boat. All of a sudden, he's very conservative about kings on ships.
Listen, the last king that came in on a ship, Lucius has kind of soured on. So,
I mean, now looking around, is there anyone trying to stop these people? Like, is there anyone who also doesn't seem to be emphatically in favor of the king that I can see in the immediate area, aside from me and Lucius?
Make me an insight check.
Yep. It's 19.
So at this point, smaller groups are starting to form from the crowd as like-minded people are kind of clumping together. And you would surmise that, given the size of the crowd here, and not everybody that seems to support one king or the other is actually calling out loudly, but you're figuring maybe 1 in 5 would be in support of Catsbin, looking around. Not all of them are shouting out, of course, but some of them are like nodding along to people who are shouting out. Some people are just having like active disagreements with other people who are supporting King Ten Sails. So about 1 in 5. So far, the status quo seems to have the new guy outnumbered. Eventually, the voice booms out again from the ship as he motions towards a fairly nice-looking, what looks like a pleasure skiff. So, kind of a large push boat where they're kind of pulling out of the harbor with essentially a large canvas tent on it. It's like a pleasure barge. Colored with the colors of House Humberth. And Catsbin the Gentle calls out. This is the King of Dunfoss recognizes the good and loyal men of House Humberth. And they shall be rewarded. After which, the king's ship starts to move again towards High Court's harbor. House Humberth does a lot of ocean trade, especially like long-distance ocean trade. They've got boats that come in periodically loaded down with material from Kiska. resources and exotic spices and strange types of wood and building material, art pieces and whatnot. So they maintain.
Humberth were the kings during Eldov's day, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Eldov Fireblood was one of the court magicians to, I don't remember his name, but House Humberth. And
I don't remember they ever got a name.
The last good king that anybody remembers in Dunfoss before Maximilian was Juliana Humberth. Basically, anytime the Court of Lords chooses a king, it more or less always comes from House Humberth. It's so the King of Dunfoss is not a hereditary office, but every fifth king kind of is. And yes, Catsbin's vessel starts moving forward again towards the harbor, towards the private docks of House Humberth. They maintain docks both in High Courts Harbor, plus they have a dock with easy access to a counting house that they maintain in East Harbor. They're one of the wealthiest families in the city, and everybody in Dunfoss just watched them claim for this new king, or this old king, I guess, King Catsbin. So you watch as the boat pulls into High Courts Harbor, and a gangplank is extended out and dropped. And a crowd starts forming up along the dock, but nobody leaves the ship. In fact, as you're watching now, you see nobody on the deck of the ship anymore. And you can't be sure, because even if you've been watching the whole time, you didn't at any point see Catsbin head back into like the wheelhouse or go below decks or anything. It's just now that the ship is fully docked in the harbor, there's nobody aboard it.
How did the I'll fly over towards the Humberth dock to get a better look. How are people react? Like, are people like extending a gangplank and just surprised that nobody gets off?
There's a crowd that's starting to mill up around the dock. Not a large crowd. These would be dock workers, specifically in House Humberth's employ. It's not a public dock, so it's not people aren't pushing their way out onto it. As you fly over, you're you're challenged for a moment by men-at-arms in service to House Humberth. What business do you give them why you should be allowed to land on their dock?
I'm not landing. I'm flying above it just to get a better look.
Just flying above it? Then people are regarding you somewhat, maybe suspiciously is the wrong word, but I mean, you're known to be a magic user who's fond of weird and crazy contraptions. So the fact that you're flying over them, over their dock, and especially with this like VIP vessel that is now moored here, they're watching you as maybe a security concern.
Mm-hmm.
The ship you're flying over, though, and I'm going to apologize to McDohl, as always. I don't actually know nautical terms or what the different parts of a ship are.
Okay.
I imagine every time that I describe a ship and use the wrong word, he like dies a little inside.
I do. That's true.
You're going to have to write me a song one day to help me remember. There are 4 large ballista mounted on the deck. And remember, the sides of the ship are painted in this bizarre green and blue colors. So from a distance, it just looks like a mirage on the ocean. There are 4 large ballista. 1 right at the front of the ship, 1 in the center, and 2 on the back, all chained down to the deck. As you look over at the ship flying above it, at first it looks like the deck of the ship is lashed together with, instead of having planks of wood, as you would expect, it looks like it's comprised over an innumerable amount of human bones. Rib cages, skulls, leg and arm bones, fastened and jointed together, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Alexander.
And after a moment, you realize that this is just the deck of the ship painted or designed to look like this. There's no texture to it. It's just painted on. Or maybe that's just what you've convinced yourself is true about this ship, because the alternative is too horrifying.
Yeah, Alexander. Got a question for you. What's the first vibe you get on a ship that has a whole bunch of skulls and bones motif? What does that say to you?
Ghost ship?
Lucius,
Is that what you're going for?
are you flying over with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least someone that wants us to think it's a ghost ship.
Also valid. Also valid realm of possibility.
How close do you get, Alexander?
I'm about 80 feet up and probably about 30 feet laterally away from them.
Okay. Make me a perception check at disadvantage.
Let's go ahead and flash a genius that to 11.
An 11?
Yep.
Okay. So when the ship was sailing in, you saw it had this bizarre glow that formed up behind its sails, as though the ship was bringing its own wind with it. That glow and the kind of massive air or moisture or whatever it was behind the sail has dissipated now that the ship is moored and the sail hangs slack. But looking at the mast the sail is attached to the deck of the ship on a large circular base that is very, very thoroughly rusted metal of some kind. This strikes you as odd because why would you build with this kind of metal on the deck of a ship? But you can also see there's moving parts involved. It's some kind of mechanism at the base of the mast.
Mm-hmm.
And Levin's not going to tell you anything else about that, though.
Sure.
You guys are just hanging out watching. We're not doing anything else as far as approaching the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody disembarks, huh?
No, in fact, there's nobody on the deck of the ship. There's no longer a man standing up at the prow. The prow is the front, right, McDohl?
Yeah.
Is the prow the front of the ship?
Yeah.
There's nobody standing out at the prow and speaking out in a booming voice anymore. You don't see any workers. You don't see anybody up amongst the rigging. You don't see anybody manning the ballistas. However, you do watch as a fairly well-dressed man, maybe one of the clerks of House Humberth, takes it upon himself to step up the gangplank. And he walks up to the deck of the ship, and you can see there's some trepidation on his face when he starts to see the motif aboard the deck of the ship. Like the planks of wood aren't just painted with skulls and rib cages and things, but are shaped in such a way they're not just boards in a line. They're purposely shaped to look like the bones that have been painted on them, to give the deck a texture like that. Or maybe that's just what you've told yourself because the alternative is too horrifying. In any event, the man walks up the gangplank of the ship and calls out, said, "Captain Catspan, I would love to come aboard and welcome the King of Dunfoss back in his triumphant return." He's standing there for a moment. There's a couple of house retainers behind him on the gangplank. They exchange glances back and forth. So the man shouts out his intention again and says, "Very well. Then I will come aboard to ensure that the ship is properly battened down." And he holds his hands up in front of him. So we mean the King of Dunfoss no harm or offense. And he takes a couple more steps forward until he puts his first foot on the deck of the ship and instantly drops dead. His foot touches the ship. He immediately loses all muscle function and falls forward and face plants.
Alexander, you ever heard of anything like that?
No.
At this point, the two retainers behind him on the gangplank are rushing forward to offer assistance.
Can I fly down and
Yeah.
yell at them to don't touch the ship?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and fly toward the gangplank and keep them from getting onto the...
Roll some initiative.
What was that, Brickroad? Roll some what?
Roll some initiative.
There it is.
Or what are we looking at here? 14 and 13, huh?
Yep.
So the first retainer on the gangplank reaches the ship before either of you swoop down, and the same thing happens to him. He runs up to the deck, tries to offer aid to this fallen clerk, and as soon as he puts his boot on the deck, he just collapses. You both arrive before the second man gets there, and he has every intention of jumping up onto the deck as well, offering aid. So that's going to bring us to Alexander. What are you going to do to stop this guy?
Boy, I don't have whip today, do I? Nope. Let's use my amazing 7 strength to body check him off of the harbor
All right, roll the hit.
into the water. So is this a strength attack roll without proficiency? Sorry, I never do this.
Unarmed attack always has proficiency.
Okay. And that's strength.
Yes.
All right. So that will be a 9.
A 9? And so you swoop down at the guy attempting to body check him, and you do collide with him, but I mean he's bigger and stronger than you are, and he's wearing probably boiled leathers. And he kind of braces for impact, and you don't manage to move him. You're going to moving or staying put?
I'll stay there. As a bonus action, I'm going to order Scrappy to dash. He's been kind of just following us along the water line, but he's probably still not very close.
It's going to take him a while, because you guys were
We flew
down here, and you flew
He's
over here.
Yep.
What are Gus and
That's
Connor
not much
doing,
of-
having seen Scrappy kind of start dashing off the streets to the north?
I mean, we're still charmed, right?
You feel very predisposed towards King Caspian. You have this vague idea that he's the rightful king. He was selected, and he's not dead, and he didn't abdicate. It's also, you guys were starting to cool on King 10 sales anyway, you know? But it's not influencing your actual actions at all.
Okay.
You're free to do what you like. So that's going to bring us to Lucius. Now, Lucius, this guy coming up the gangplank, you see on his face, half of him looks like he's noticed what happened to the first two people who touched the ship. The other half seems to be focused on Alexander, who is trying to prevent him from reaching the ship.
All right, I'm gonna lean on that. That his realization that what happened to the other two guys. I'm gonna cast suggestion, and I'm gonna say, I suggest you return to the dock and think about this before you proceed.
Is that a whiz save?
That is a wisdom saving throw, AC 17.
I have a 9.
Okay, yeah. So that could be his next attack. Yeah, that effect is gonna last for the next 8 hours or until I dismiss it.
And you tell him to go back down to the dock and rethink this.
Yeah,
Is that a concentration spell?
it is. That means,
Well, you get a feather fall, but everyone else is hitting the water.
Yep.
He says, I don't want to sell you death sticks, and turns around, heads back down to the dock. And at this point, people on the dock are starting to process what they've just seen. And it's starting up towards the harbor, and you're starting to see panic now as people the small group from House Humberth, several of them break and run back down along the docks, down to the harbor itself. The man that you sent down is he gets down to the bottom of the gangplank, looks back up at you guys, and looks back at kind of the rest of the crowd. He starts trying to prevent anybody else from running up.
Lucius kind of stumbles as he kind of feather falls onto the ground, onto the dock next to the guy,
Okay.
and he's looking around, looking back up towards the ship. Now that he can get a closer look at it.
Do you have proficiency in ocean-going vehicles, navigation,
Sure.
anything that would be... Okay. Other than the description I've already given, the only thing you notice about the ship is... It looks perfectly seaworthy. Like, I mean, you've read probably tales of ghost ships and things and how they always... They're floating despite being dilapidated and broken. They wouldn't look seaworthy, but this one absolutely does. Connor and the other guy. What are your plans for the day?
I mean, Connor would start going after the Badger
Yeah.
once he saw the Badger moving.
And Alex,
That's his name.
are you staying kind of just flying above the ship?
I'm gonna fly down onto the gangplank and do the terrible job I could do of bodily preventing anyone else from getting on this ship.
So the man that Lucius turned back is starting to express to these people that that touching the ship was deadly. I mean, everybody saw it. Everybody watched. So the two bodies are just located up on the deck of the ship where the gangplank comes up and are just laying there. And you do see panic starting to spread around the crowd. Doesn't look like there's much chance of anybody trying to reach the ship. Exactly the opposite, in fact. So after a few minutes, Scrappy and Gus and Connor would come around from the opposite side. And in the confusion, you managed to slip out into the harbor without being challenged. I guess
Situation.
the question, is, do any of the four of you do anything in regards to the ship at this moment?
Lucius is going to head back across the city toward the Keyskin embassy because, as you stated before, House Humberth has dealings with Keyskin, so it stands to reason that Keyskin interests might have some information as to what's going on here.
Okay. So this panic starts to spread out across the city, not just in High Courts Harbor, but the fact that this bizarre ghost
Alex
ship...
is going to head to the Chartographers Guild.
Okay.
And he is going to try and requisition any records for anything we have on the final voyage of King Caspian.
Well, you're the first one to do it, unless that was intentional.
Capstan?
Catspin.
Catspin.
Yeah. Okay, let me make a note of this.
If I happen to cross Gustavus or Connor in the travel time, then
Yeah, Gus and Connor, what are you guys going to be doing?
We're making our way towards you, so
Yeah.
We can assume that you guys have met up if you want to break off into smaller groups and do your thing. But in general, I want to know what you're spending the day doing, because nothing else immediately happens with the ship. It's now moored in High Courts Harbor. 2 guys have tried to board it and were killed. And nobody's gone up to try to collect the bodies yet.
So the first thing Gus is going to do is ask. I'm gonna gonna listen to Alex kind of explain what happened to the bodies, and then I'm gonna say, "Oh, okay, I have an idea," and then I'm gonna usher him off the gangplank and kick the gangplank into the ocean where nobody can just walk onto the boat. Okay, that's short-term solution number one.
Okay.
I mean, does anyone have any magic that can like levitate those bodies off of the deck and over here?
Spent for an hour. Need a break.
This seems like a job
Could
for
you do it if
Tensio's
you,
floating disc.
Actually, hold on. No, it's not. Wait,
I
let's
don't
wait
even
too
have
high.
magic that can do it.
Spencer's floating disc couldn't get out there because it only follows you 20 feet behind.
Ah, damn it. You just kicked the gangplank in the water, so...
Well, to get out there, somebody would have to walk onto the boat.
Wait,
And
do you
they
have
would
levitate if you had your spells back?
I surely don't.
Okay.
And yeah, Gus and Connor, by the time you guys get around to the harbor, this feeling of... I mean, you might still feel this way. It's up to you, I guess. But the compulsion of feeling like Catsbin is the rightful king of Dunfoss, whatever has come over you, the magic has faded. But it doesn't... You don't feel any different. It doesn't feel like you're coming out of a charm. How you guys actually feel towards King Catsbin, I'll let you decide.
But there is a recognition in my head of, wait a minute.
You remember calling out, like, long live King Catsbin, and you remember kind of having a little argument with Lucius and Alex about it for a couple of minutes, but it didn't seem unreasonable then, and it doesn't really seem unreasonable to you now. Maybe a little strange, but...
Well, you know, Gus doesn't particularly care who sits on the throne. So, you know.
Well, Connor was well and truly the catalyst for getting him on the throne. So he kind of...
You've got a dog in this fight.
He... When
ignored-
the charm effect effectively lifts, Connor hits Gus in the chest and just goes, "Wait a minute. What?"
Gus, your friend just punched you in the chest.
What? Yeah, it's a boat. It's made out of skulls.
Yes, it's evil boat. We need to deal with it. We were arguing in favor of Catsbin?
Were we? I guess we were.
Yeah, we were.
I mean, it doesn't sound unreasonable if he didn't die, but that's not really...
Yes.
Although, I'm starting to have second guesses about whether he did actually die. That is an evil ship, man.
Do you think it was maybe an illusion?
Ooh, yeah, there's nobody
Two
get off
dead
the ship.
people don't really constitute illusion to me.
What if he's a ghost?
Then he wouldn't be eligible to be king. Pretty sure you can't have a ghost king, they're dead. The rightful king business would be over.
Well, technically, none of the courts have tried to put forth a ghost king.
Great, we have a precedential-based law system.
I mean, there are still legal mechanisms for removing a king that just haven't... Nobody's taken advantage of them for many, many generations. Just because kings do tend to die after a while, so people are just like, we'll just wait it out.
Just in case they put an asshole elf in charge and they gotta wait 1,200 years for
Right.
to get rid of him.
Yeah, it's like it's D&D, so it's not like there aren't mortal races that still don't last forever.
Yeah, elves, dwarves, and gnomes, people are probably a little bit more judgmental about. I can't do anything to retrieve these bodies until tomorrow. I don't know about anybody else.
I mean,
it's not... It doesn't have to be up to us to retrieve the bodies.
yeah.
It would be nice. It'd be a good thing to do.
I'll grab one of like the men-at-arms or agents of House Humberth and ask, does House Humberth follow Osprey? What's their religious leaning?
Kind of depends on which member of House Humberth you're talking about. Traditionally, they don't have strong ties to any of the temples in Dunfoss, and there have been a few of them, especially when a Humberth historically sits the throne. They make a big show of following like the pantheon of Kiska, just because they have interests there.
Mm-hmm.
So there probably is a member of House Humberth who's a follower of Osprey. The current head of the house is a man named Duke Rune Humberth, and he is the nephew of Juliana the First, so he's very well known in town. And he doesn't really have any predilection towards any of the temples. So what are Gus and Connor doing for the remainder of the day?
I mean, before we drive off, I'm sitting there having a conversation. Do we want to, before we leave, do we want to try and grab the bodies? I'm pretty sure we could figure something out.
Well, we've already kicked the gangplank into the ocean.
Right. We have a magical engineer.
Well, Alex will pull the wing clips off his boots, attach them to your boots, and hand you 100 feet of rope and a 10-foot pole.
I think this is I think this is fine. Gus runs out, kicks the gangplank down, turns around and like, what are you guys standing there for? Go get me a gangplank.
So I'll make sure the boots don't require attunement. I don't think they do.
I mean, I was just gonna say let's shoot the bodies with an arrow and then just pull them back. That would work, right?
Yeah, the arrow would break.
You want to hook shot bodies. Have I got that right?
I'm a fighter, not a hooksologist.
Hooksologist?
Thank you, Treble. That was great.
I am just a little concerned that like touching the boat with a wooden stick might set it off or flying too close above it.
I am actually concerned that touching the bodies would set it off, so let's just
Hook shot
not.
it. Sorry.
Would a hook shot be a common, uncommon, or rare magic item?
That suffice it to say, none of you have a hook shot, so it's a moot point.
Yet.
So yeah, what are Gus and Connor doing today?
Well, all right. If we are staying near this boat, I need to know.
Well, Alex and Lucius are not.
Okay.
They've got business elsewhere in town.
Yeah.
So there's no sun in the sky,
No.
and has anything else? So nothing else like overtly hostile has happened. It's just the sky got blotted out. And
It looks like it's a particularly dark twilight in the sky right now, even though it's the middle of the day. And there are clouds in the sky, but not like dark storm clouds, the kind of which would blot out the sun. There's definitely some sort of sinister magic at work here.
right.
And the priest of Osprey died trying to scry the ship, or the knight. I don't remember which.
So, first thing on my mind, remember that Lucidifost guy, the crazy gnome that killed Florian?
What about him?
Well, he said that Prince Caspian would come back. Prince Caspian. Oh my God. King Caspian.
Got the name right, but got the title wrong.
My brain went to print. My brain went a half-seas on Prince Caspian.
Right.
He said he would come back when the X number of kings died. Does that mean that, and I'm gonna like hook my finger over to the palace district and like, does that mean the Tencels is dead? We should probably check on that. At least to figure out.
Is that what you're doing today?
I wasn't concerned about that until you brought it up. Now I'm concerned about it.
Yeah.
Fair concern. Yeah.
So Gus and Connor are going to go check on 10 sales?
Yeah.
Right.
What are we gonna say to him when he's alive and he's like, "What are you doing?"
Well,
We're gonna
we
tell him
told
that-
we
we're
told
gonna
him
tell him-
about.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay.
He
But a
promised
scary.
he promised he'd send somebody down there to arrest and then execute the gnome. That's why Gus didn't go down there and kill him.
Okay.
'Cause-
Lucius. The Keyskin embassy, the doors are closed and locked when you arrive. Presumably because the city is experiencing some kind of bizarre magical twilight. And Keyskins have strange exotic beliefs and superstitions about the color of the sky at any given point. So you could probably get somebody's attention and talk your way in if you were so inclined. But it looks as though they're not admitting people in off the street at the moment.
Okay. Now Lucius will attempt to charisma his way in there.
Okay. And you catch somebody's attention through one of the windows. And the woman who gives you admittance into the embassy is the young, beautiful daughter of the ambassador, Mato.
Mato, yes.
And when she sees you, her face lights up. She is delighted that you've come back. And she immediately begins asking all sorts of questions about what's happening at the harbor.
Near as I can tell, I saw one man drop dead, and I heard one man drop dead. Saw the body, and then I saw another man drop dead. It saved a third from dropping dead on the deck of the ship. Two of House Humberth's men.
So what is it you're looking to get out of the embassy?
Trying to find out what history Kiska has with these guys, with Catsman, like before he was ascended. Like, has there been any history of what he was doing before he ascended to the throne? I don't think Mato would know that because she's just got here.
Mato doesn't, but there's other people at the embassy. For example, you could probably set a meeting with the ambassador himself if he's not doped out of his gourd at the moment.
Yeah, he's not blitzed.
Make a history check. You can make this. We'll make the history check. Let's see what you know about Catsman's history. Having said you didn't live here and weren't really paying attention.
Apparently Lucius does read historical books from time to time. So 24.
The big controversy when Catsman was selected, his selection to the throne, was a big matter of debate and lots of sour grapes. The previous king of Dunfoss was King Eriadul. Eriadul was called the Scion, and he was selected by the Court of the Gods.
Yeah.
The reason it was such a controversial selection is because Eriadul was a member of one of the magic schools in Dunfoss, the Apple of Time. Apple of Time they have like a kind of mystic, martial artsy kind of meditation, new agey kind of function. Eriadul wasn't known as being an acolyte or a priest or a cleric or really associated with any of the temples. So to have him being selected by the Court of the Gods, a lot of people thought there might have been foul play, and he did die under very strange circumstances. Catsman was headmaster of Circle of Rains, but he was also a practicing acolyte of Osbrim, so there was controversy when he was selected as well. People saying perhaps the Court of the Gods feel like they deserve a do-over, so they pulled the strings and got this guy who was an acolyte of Osbrim selected.
So he's a follower of Osprey then.
Catsman is, yes.
Yeah, Catsman was.
Eriadul, no one was really sure.
Okay.
And then Catsman vanished at sea, and the rest of history So that's where the big controversy was. The Court of the Gods and the Court of Arts kind of both felt like they got cheated out of their pick, and now they've got to wait for their court to come around again. And in as much as anybody in the Keyskin embassy is worried about who's sitting the throne currently, because the next king is presumably going to be King Rune of House Humberth. And usually when a Humberth sits the throne of Dunfoss, they try to some kind of scheme to marry Dunfoss's power to Kiska's across the ocean.
Okay.
So these are the kind of conversations you're having with them. To this end, they don't have any particular dislike of King's Ten Sails. It's just like their turn is next. So the sooner this Ten Sails guy moves on, however that needs to happen, like the sooner Keyskin power in Dunfoss is going to balloon back out.
Okay.
The more you have these kinds of conversations with people in the embassy, and the less attention you pay to Motto. She's always kind of hovering around you, but you can tell that she's very disapproving of your focusing on all of this ancient political hornswoggle, and not so much the extremely exciting and interesting ghost ship that has just sailed into Dunfoss.
I'm trying to find out a reason why somebody claiming to be King Catspan would be on a ghost ship sailed into the harbor. I find that endlessly fascinating. I'm trying to get the historical context straight before I proceed.
Well, what do you mean pretending to be King Catspan? How do you know it's not him?
I haven't seen the man for my own eyes.
Anything else you're trying to get out of the embassy or out of Motto today? She's forbidden from leaving the embassy at this moment. Remember, her father's very protective, and so if things are even slightly going awry, which tends to be really the only time you stop by the embassy anymore, when things are starting to get weird.
Lucius has been a busy man. Life has been weird these past few months.
So listen, I had to go to space. It was a whole thing.
It was a whole thing. Yeah.
Excuse me, the Contra Arrow Shell.
Contra Arrow Shell, yes. Yeah. Still a theoretical term. Let's be honest. No, I will definitely leave word to if they have any need to send a runner to the barge and
Any need for what?
any need of my assistance.
Well, yeah, but in what? In what matter? Like, why would they have need to send for you?
Oh ship.
If any word comes from House Humberth about what kind of response they have to do for the deaths of two men in
Okay.
in their employ.
Make a persuasion check.
27.
You do manage to eke out a bit of information that you're not sure anybody in the embassy was supposed to let loose. House Humberth, their lands are called the Redlands. They're out of the city by a considerable distance, and a lot of very rich vineyards. That's their trade in wine predominantly. I mean, they're a very wealthy house. They have their fingers in a lot of little pies, but wine is where, like, they have good land for growing grapes, and wine is their main business, what people know them best for, other than being kings of Dunfoss. The current leader of the head of the house is Duke Rune, and he typically, the head of a house, would usually stay at the family's estate and someone else in the family would represent the house's interest in Dunfoss. This is typically how things are handled when a family's business is outside of the Dunfoss walls. But one of the men in the embassy that you speak to today does let slip that Duke Rune is currently in the city. So if you have interest in learning anything particular about how House Humberth is responding to this new calamity, that is an avenue you might look into.
Yeah, and I think Lucius would probably pursue that with as much urgency as he can at the moment.
Alex, you were checking at the Cartographers Guild to find out if there's any information you could find on the last voyage of King Catsbin.
Right.
King Maximilian never had a royal vessel, and the reason for that is because his people were from the Silvery Mountains. They didn't do a lot of sailing. He didn't see any reason to have a ship built for himself. But before Maximilian's time, there was a royal vessel in Dunfoss, just kind of owned and operated by the crown. Each new king that selected earned or inherited the rights to make use of this particular vessel. It wasn't a war galleon, it more likely was just a pleasure vessel, but it was a relatively large ship. That was the ship King Catsbin sailed out on, which was lost.